Again, totally misleading. Number 12 deals with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This is a big issue and very hard to deal with in a short video. But very quickly, the employment aspect. And again, here's a position Ron Paul, the easiest thing in the world would be to say, yep, this was the greatest piece of legislation in the history of mankind, now leave me alone. Okay, and he knows he's going to be accused of having sinister motives, and he's a bad guy, and be smeared all the time if he takes this on, and he does it anyway. Again, this is not, this isn't something, Rudy Giuliani isn't going to do that. He'll give you all the predictable, I can script everything that's going to come out of that guy's mouth. Does that make him a hero? No, basically there are 2 points to this. The employment aspect of it basically is as follows. That, again, we're taught that nobody would make any progress if it weren't for federal regulation. If it weren't for the federal government, we'd all be dead in a ditch. We'd all be eating poisoned food. We'd all be earning $1 a day. Our kids would all be in mines. I'm trying to refute that in my writing and in my articles and so forth. But on the employment angle, we're taught that, if it weren't for the Civil Rights Act of 1964, there'd be no black middle class, there'd be no black employment, and so on and on. But this is just phony baloney nonsense that you can verify just by looking at the statistics. From 1954 to 1964, the 10 years before the Civil Rights Act, the number of blacks in professional and technical occupations more than doubled. In other kinds of occupations, blacks saw even greater progress in the 1940s, when there was hardly any civil rights policy to speak of, than in the 1950s, when the civil rights movement was in its heyday. The rise in the number of blacks in professional and technical occupations in the 2 years following the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was less than in the 1 year from 1961 to 1962. And when we look at percentages, we see again that there is no acceleration by the Civil Rights Act of 1964 of employment trends that were already in existence. So the percentage of employed blacks who were managers and administrators was the same in 1967 as it was in 1964 and 1960. Thomas Sowell has a lot of this information, and again, on my resource page, I'll include it. Mexican-American incomes rose in relation to those of whites from 1959 to 1969, it's true, but not at a greater rate than they had from 1949 to 1959, before the Civil Rights Act. Chinese and Japanese American households had matched their white counterparts in income already by 1959. So again, the conventional wisdom on this, which is based on nothing, is completely phony. Then in terms of segregation, well, this is tougher because it's very hard not to sympathize with people who were subject to all kinds of indignities that very few human beings today would defend. But obviously in the year 2011, if somebody is going to have a racially restrictive restaurant, well, he's going to be boycotted and picketed out of existence in about 5 seconds. And in fact, when you think of places that would survive with a policy like that, these would be backwater institutions run by yahoos. I mean, do you really want to be associated with an institution like that, a restaurant or whatever facility like that? I mean, wouldn't it be better to know who these people are so that you can withhold your dollars from them? Now, Ron Paul's view is that private property is private property. He's a Lockean Rothbardian in the philosophy of private property, and his view is that property is acquired in certain ways, justly, and that once somebody acquires it, there is no third party that magically acquires authority over your property just because you happen to open it to the public. It's still your property, and you can act like a jerk if you want to on your property. But it's extremely dangerous to curtail private property rights, even when it seems like the just thing to do. Inserting violence into the equation is not the just thing to do. And in particular, given that attitudes on race were liberalizing dramatically in the 50s and 60s, well, again, we already see that tremendous progress was being made. And then with the Voting Rights Act of 1965, that really did away with a great many of the problems, particularly in school desegregation. It wasn't the court cases that did away with that. It was granting voting rights. And then suddenly, amazingly, the politicians cared about this previously despised minority. Number 13, let markets care for the disabled. The Americans with Disabilities Act, says Ron Paul, should never have been passed. The treatment of the handicapped should be left to the free market. And this is supposed to be extremism. Okay, well, let's go through that. After the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed, the employment of Americans with disabilities plummeted. Well, now, why should that be? I mean, Josh Harkinson would say, well, it's called the Americans with Disabilities Act. So it obviously helps people with disabilities. I mean, didn't you read the name of the act? Okay, well, you look at it, though, and it didn't do that. Well, why didn't it? Well, before the act, if you wanted to hire somebody with a disability, well, you would try it out and see if the person's productivity outweighed the special accommodations you'd have to make for that person's disability. And if it worked out, great. If it didn't, then you'd try something else. But after the act, well, then you have to submit to what the government decides is a fair wage and a fair amount to pay for accommodation. And if it doesn't work out, then you're slapped with a lawsuit. So what people decided to do at that point was, well, I'm just not going to hire them in the first place. And you say, aha, well, then we can sue them for employment discrimination. But if they're clever enough about the way they market the job, the disabled will never find out about the job in the first place. So why do any disabled support this legislation? Well, if you were employed before the legislation went into effect, then you're doing great, because now you're in there and you've got a lawsuit-protected job. Like, you're not going anywhere. But now it's a barrier to entry for other people with disabilities. So this is not a point of view you're going to read in Mother Jones, because we're just going to confine ourselves to the name of the act, Americans with Disabilities Act. What, do you hate people with disabilities? You want to push them down the stairs or something? This is the level of conversation they want us to have. Number 14, we're almost done, is called First Do Harm. He wants to end birthright citizenship. Oh my goodness gracious. Again, the earth is going to tumble into the sun. Well, only 30 out of the world's 194 countries have birthright citizenship. And among the advanced economies, only Canada and the United States have automatic birthright citizenship for the children of illegal aliens. So I will anxiously await the massive global campaign against this, led by Mother Jones magazine. Basically, just Ron Paul's view is that this puts a burden on the American welfare state, and moreover, there's a certain absurdity to the position. My friend Kevin Gutzman points this out. Let's suppose Canada a Canadian army invaded the U.S., and one of the women in the army, while she was invading the U.S., gave birth. That means that the child of a member of an invading army automatically becomes a U.S. citizen. It seems and can collect like food stamps or something. Does it seem a little bit peculiar? So that's simply his position. It's a position that's held by most of the countries of the world. The immigration policies of Mexico are far more stringent than those of the U.S. And again, we'll await the great campaign against that, led by Mother Jones magazine. And finally, number 15, diss Mother Teresa. Because he voted against giving her the Congressional Gold Medal. He also voted against giving a similar medal to Ronald Reagan. And they mock him by saying he argued that the medal, which cost $30,000, is too expensive. Well, what he actually said was not that it was too expensive, but that it's very easy to spend other people's money. It seems $30,000. Well, they burned through that in a fraction of a second, so why should they think twice about this? But his argument was, we're pretty wealthy here in Congress. If every congressman put up $100, we would more than cover the price of this medal. So, put your money where your mouth is. You want to honor this person, honor her with your own money. You want to honor this former president, honor him with your own money. $100, I mean, these people spend that on a bottle of wine. Lead by example. And Ron Paul was willing to put that $100 forth. Not one other congressman was willing to do it. And we're told we're supposed to despise him and love all these other establishment hacks? I suggest the truth is the other way around. Okay, I went as fast as I could through the 15 extreme positions. Ooh. But I'm going to put up a resource page, so once you see this video, it'll be up, and you'll find it at tomwoods.com/MotherJones, where you'll find some resources that will elaborate on some of the points I made here. But if you're going to try and make something stick to Ron Paul, you're going to have to try a little bit harder than this. He disagrees with Hillary Clinton and Mitt Romney. To jail with this enemy of the people. Good grief. Heaven help us. Thanks for listening.